What's up, guys? It's your boy Mizzy. I'm here today to cover the Alabama wide receiver room. Man, I think this is one of the most underappreciated units in college football. Of course, the biggest question for a lot of Alabama fans, and not just Alabama fans, but college football fans, what will Ryan Coleman Williams do this year? Ryan had when he stepped on the scene, of course, at 17, that Ryan don't hate the player, hate the balls, album dropping soon. But when Ryan Williams stepped on the scene, everybody was like, wait, this guy's the next superstar wide receiver at Alabama. With a sophomore slump, even though Ryan Williams had a 700 receiving yards last year. So let's not act, I think we got to this point that people started acting like Ryan Williams was just trash. Ryan Williams is a good wide receiver. Now we expected superstar. So that's a difference. Being good and we need you to be a superstar. I do agree. Ryan Williams, you can't drop certain passes, man. Touchdown in the end zone versus Georgia last year. We end up winning, but them are passes you gotta win. That you gotta get. So first of all, guys, like I said, we got Ryan Williams on the team. You got Noah Rogers, who got hurt in the 8A game. Don't know when he will be back. So, like I said, we're not going to address him for real. I hope he does come back healthy because Noah Rogers was going to be probably a third option on this team. But like I said, that just means other guys got to step up. So first of all, then we got Cedarian Morgan, freshman. Then you got Rico Scott. Rico Scott's name was real big last year. You haven't heard it as much lately. But Rico Scott, like I said, we'll see what he ended up being. But Cedarian Morgan, guys, I like Cedarian Morgan, a 6'4" guy, 225, could be a big red zone threat. I think when you look at wide receiver rooms, even in halfback rooms, but specifically we talking about wide receiver rooms in this video, when you're looking at wide receivers, you want to have a plethora of different guys. You don't want to have a bunch of guys that all do the same thing, if you get what I mean. You want to have a guy who's a red zone threat, big body. You want to have a speed guy. You want to have a guy who can play in the slot, a guy who plays on the wide, at the X, a guy, like I said, who can do a little bit of everything. So, like I said, I think this wide receiver room has a lot of guys that, they do multiple things. But Cedarian Morgan, of course, he's a freshman, so I'm sure he'll make mistakes. But even in the 8-day game, guys, we've seen the potential of talent that Cedarian Morgan does have. So, like I said, I just think Cedarian Morgan, with Noah Rogers' injury, he may be the third wide receiver on this team. So, like I said, we'll see how that goes. And another thing, guys, I think Ryan Williams and Lotzir Brooks, especially Lotzir Brooks. Brooks, I loved him last year, guys. He was balling. But Lotzir Brooks, they have to be a dynamic duo. Either Keelan Russell or Austin Mack, whoever the quarterback is, Ryan Williams and Lotzir Brooks will have to be there to take pressure off him. And of course, like I said, I get into another video when I do the halfback room. But like I said, Lotzir Brooks last year, one thing about him, I can't remember him dropping no passes. When the ball comes in his direction, he comes down with it. And he's like 5'9", but he plays bigger than his size. Like I say, and one thing about Brooks, guys, he's a speed guy. He's like a 4'3", like a 4'3", 3'9" guy. So like I said, I just think, having that speed guy, then having Cedarian Morgan, it's going to make a big compliment to whoever the quarterback is. And guys, let me know, who do y'all think will be the quarterback for Alabama? The starter still hasn't been named. But one thing, like I said, Brooks, he's a track guy, elite speed. Another guy that hasn't been talked about a lot because he got hurt last year, Derek Meadows, 6'5". Like I said, he's kind of different than Cedarian Morgan. Both of them big guys. But Derek Meadows, more of a slim build, more like 210, 215. Cedarian, he's like, 225, 230, bigger guy, more physical. So I think you can see some sets with both of them on the field. Like I say, we'll see how Kalen DeBoer and the guys, get the offense going this year. But I think they'll want to establish early who's going to be the 1, 2, 3, establish who's going to be leading in the wide receiver room. And then, guys, you got Rico Scott. Rico Scott, I think he'll probably be a fourth or fifth option. He's like a 4-4-3 guy, like I say. But we seen moments and glimpses of Rico Scott. He hasn't had a big role in the offense, but with this wide receiver room, he could have a bigger role. One thing I'll say, guys, I do like the wide receivers we have, but with Noah Rogers' injury, you can't afford a lot of other injuries, guys. That's one thing with the NIL deals, the transfer portal. You remember the days of Alabama, Georgia just having so many 5 stars that when a guy got hurt, you hated that a starter got hurt, but it wasn't such a big thing. You used to be like, hey, Alabama got another 5 star that'll come right behind him. Now, in today's college football, it's a little bit different because, like I said, you can't just stack your roster like you used to. So, like I say, guys, I think Alabama wide receiver room. I don't know why I would have on ranked for the year. I do think Ryan Williams needs to. I don't know if he needs to be the leader of the team, as far as the vocal leader. I do think he needs to be a leader with his play. Some guys are, verbal leaders, say like a Ray Lewis or, a guy like that. And then some guys are just leader by the way they play, but he has to come out this year strong. I think he needs to have at least 1,000 yard year. He needs to have at least 1,000 yard year, maybe 8 touchdowns. Like I said, I hope we have a 1,500 yard year. But like I said, with a freshman quarterback, well, like I say, with Sedarian Morgan, like I said, a freshman wide receiver. We'll see how he goes. And then, like I say, Austin Matt and Keelan, we still haven't seen the starter get named. And that could change the offense as well. Keelan, more of a running guy. A lot of times, I think Ryan, when you watch Ryan when he played with Jalen Milroe, I think that style kind of suited him a little more because Ryan Williams, he's a really you can tell he's like backyard football guy. When the ball's in the air, he just likes to catch it. He's real creative. When he played with Ty Simpson, him and Ty Simpson could never get on the same page as far as say deep balls. And that progressed through the year. Ty Simpson was more of kind of like a mid-range shooter like Chris Paul. Ty Simpson was more like say 10 yard, 15 yard. A lot of them passes did convert the 30, 40 yard bombs down the field. And you can go back and look at the stats and it'll show like a lot of times either, I don't want to say it was Ty Simpson all the way, but either way they couldn't get that going. When Jalen Milroe was there, Jalen Milroe was a deep thrower. He couldn't get the the easy throws going. So like I say, Ryan Williams was a lot of times he was going deep, catching deep passes. And like I say, I think that's more comfortable for him. So I want to see early in the season is they just going to have Ryan, because last year they tried to play him in the slot more too. Is they going to have Ryan just go back to being the X wide receiver, put Brooks there? Like, how is the offense going to go? So like I said, guys, it's a lot of questions for this team. But like I said, they got the pieces. One thing about Alabama, guys, they will never step on the field and not have talent. It just is the coaches coaching up that talent, is the coaches put them in the right position. But either way, guys, like, comment, subscribe, share. Appreciate y'all. Catch you next time.